All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes or seconds just to let everyone get logged on, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay, it looks like we're slowing down here. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Then thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Sufficiently Protect Your Business from Catastrophic Cargo Loss and Damage Claims. My name is Tracy Neal, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Trucker Tools, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions during the webinar, please place them in the questions box on the right side of your screen, and we will answer the questions at the end of the webinar during our Q&A session. There are some poll questions included throughout the webinar. So when that poll question pops up on your screen, just take a moment to answer that question. And finally, this session is being recorded, and we will send you a copy of the recording after the webinar. And now I would like to introduce our speakers today. In this webinar, you will hear from Johnny McCord, Jim Hyde, and Matt Silver as they share the key objectives to our business collaboration, benefits for brokers and truckers, present several use cases, answer the most asked questions about supplemental coverage, and walk you through a step-by-step process to select a policy that is right for you. Johnny McCord is the founder and CEO of Loadsure and has 20 years of experience in the cargo and logistics insurance industry. Jim Hyde is also a founder and COO of Loadsure and has 20 years of experience in the transportation industry. And finally, we have Matt Silver, the VP of Partnerships at Trucker Tools, who has over 10 years of experience in the transportation industry. And now I will go ahead and kick it over to Matt to give an introduction of Trucker Tools and start the conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. And Johnny, Jim, thank you for joining us today. And thanks to everybody joining us live, as well as those that are going to watch the streaming content after this originally airs. So we'll start with a little bit about Trucker Tools. Trucker Tools is a carrier relationship management platform that provides load visibility, predictive freight matching, and trip planning solutions for the transportation industry. On the broker-facing side of our platform, we give brokers accurate real-time data, matching loads to available trucks and providing you with capacity that is known to run a given lane. This is all enhanced with POD document management, as well as our unique ability to add digital freight management to your brokerage with our Book It Now platform. With our popular driver app and extensive ELD support, we provide automated real-time shipment tracking. We can help eliminate check calls, and we can improve your operational efficiency, both to the broker and the carrier. Our platform is centered around the Trucker Tools driver application, which is not only the most downloaded app in the industry, it's also the least deleted, which I always find to be a really cool stat for us. Today, this is comprised of over 250,000 unique carrier MCs, which equates to just over 2 million drivers that are using the app. The reason we have such a high number of downloads for motor carriers and drivers is because the app is built as a lifestyle app for the driver. And they've got over 17 free features that they use while they're on the road. More specifically, we do not charge the drivers a monthly fee to access any of your loads or any of our features. This means they're matched only to loads that they have a high probability to haul. And we eliminate loads as soon as they get covered. So there's no white noise left for them to call on freight that doesn't exist anymore. Drivers know that all these loads are real, available, and curated specifically to them based on their habits. I'm going to kick it over to Johnny to talk about Loadsure.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, delighted to be here. It's a real honor to have partnered with Trucker Tools. Bit of background on Loadsure. Loadsure is the freight industry's first digitally native insurtech managing general agent, and we've created AI-powered pay-as-you-go freight insurance products that enable coverage to be purchased in 40 seconds or less. My background, I'm a London insurance broker with over 20 years experience in the freight industry, as mentioned, and I learned of the pain points of the freight community and became very passionate about solving them. And that's Loadsure's core value, and the core value being to better serve the freight community. There is a huge underinsurance crisis right now, and over 60% of cargo in transit is under or uninsured, and that's due to the cumbersome traditional insurance approaches that have ultimately been unable to efficiently serve the freight industry's SMBs, which make up a huge proportion of the industry. So what's happened in the past is that SMBs have been forced to purchase expensive, large annual, one-dimensional products that are ultimately aimed for large enterprises, or had to run the risk of complete or partial exposure to relying on the carrier's liability, which, as we know, and we're here to educate, has many exclusions, and ultimately only pays penny on the dollar in the event of a claim if you're actually able to prove liability in the first place. So there's a growing problem. It's not just a niche commercial problem. We're all affected by this crisis, and with this partnership, we're helping reduce this underinsurance crisis that's occurring. And we look at COVID-19, you look at the geopolitical instability, the war in Ukraine. There is unprecedented stress on the supply chain, and that affects us all. So we're here to ultimately try and support and solve that. This unnecessary exposure is actually affecting the price of goods, of the goods in transit. Those are the goods that we are reliant upon every single day.
Yeah, appreciate that overview, Johnny. And I know I can speak from my background on the brokerage side that most of us don't truly understand our insurance until we go to use it and find out that it does in fact not cover what we're hoping to use it for. And so hopefully there's some individuals on this call that are going to find great value out of this. But before we dive into some of the meat and potatoes here, we want to talk and get a poll from the audience that's on the call with us today about when do you purchase insurance for your loads. Some of the options starting at the bottom there are do not purchase insurance for any of our loads, which could be dangerous again with not knowing excluded commodities and true values from a lot of the shippers. That puts everybody at risk. There's another option for when we're moving an extremely valuable load, which seems a little more obvious, especially if your standard is asking your carriers for $100,000 of cargo. And often days, especially with commodities climbing in value, a lot of loads are exceeding that very frequently, especially on the full truckload side. And then the best answer, I think, is we purchase insurance for every load we haul. So we'll give that a moment just to get filled out there.
Thanks, Matt. And that question is up on your screen. We're about 50% participated right now. So I'll leave it up for another minute and then I'll share the results. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it now. And the results should be up on your screen. So we've got 29% say they purchase insurance for every load, 57% for extremely valuable loads, and 14% that do not purchase load insurance at all.
Excellent. And Johnny and Jim, I assume this falls pretty much in line with what you guys see from your clientele on a regular basis.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty familiar sort of stat.
Awesome. So as we get into it, I'll turn it back over to you guys for what's the difference between all risk coverage and MTC coverage?
Absolutely. So if we start with MTC coverage, obviously motor truck cargo coverage is an insurance that provides coverage for the trucking company for their liability that they might occur whilst in care, custody, and control of a third party's cargo. So that, as I mentioned earlier, has many many exclusions, and obviously it's a liability policy, and it only responds if you're able to prove negligence in the first place. Whereas an all risk shipper's interest policy ultimately is there regardless of being reliant on MTC policy. So it's a first party policy. It responds in the event of the cargo being damaged straight away, and therefore is enabling the ultimate cargo owner to be fully compensated on full invoice value and able to get back into their business and their day-to-day hold.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what liability insurance is, right? So liability insurance, at least motor carrier liability, cargo liability insurance is designed to cover the carrier's liability in handling that cargo, right? So the carrier has to be negligent in order for that policy to apply. Whereas all risk coverage, the coverage that Loadsure offers, is cargo coverage. It insures the cargo, not just the liability of the carrier in handling that cargo.
And Jim, speaking about the liability, I know, again, from my experience on the brokerage side of things, usually we have to prove driver negligence when we don't have an all risk policy in play. Is it different when a broker is purchasing a third party all risk policy for a specific shipment?
No, the negligence does not come into play in settling an all risk claim.
As long as physical loss or damage occurred whilst in transit, then that's all that's needed to be proven to settle a claim against that policy.
Yep.
Certainly a lot easier for brokers, when we're sitting third party and we're never physically touching the cargo. A lot easier to just demonstrate that it left in condition A and it was delivered in condition B, which is materially different than condition A, as opposed to having to go back and somehow prove that a driver while transiting across the country somehow was negligent. So appreciate the feedback on that. The next slide we've got here.
Sorry, just to add that to obviously the MTC side is the claims process is very drawn out because of having to prove negligence, and then obviously the tariff then that applies to that negligence if it's proven in the first place.
Yep,
most definitely. And there's actually a really interesting point there. Again, always going back to my past of sitting in the broker's seat, one of the ways we would get an inroad with a new shipper or customer is ask them about their claims experience in their past. Most of them are going to have some horrific experience. And as a new sales organization trying to earn their business, we would explain that we offer different insurance products and we can separate ourselves by performing differently during the claims process. And they're not going to wait 9 months to be denied or anything like that. We can usually do it inside of 30 or 45 days for them.
Absolutely, or less.
Hopefully less. So the next piece here is where can users access Loadsure cargo insurance within Trucker Tools. So interestingly enough, we have two sides to our marketplace: the driver app, where drivers can go in right on their mobile device. They can click on the Loadsure icon under insurance in the menu, and they're able to enter in all the cargo information. All the boxes are pre-filled and it transmits right over to Loadsure, and they can purchase the policy right inside the app, nice and easy. On the brokerage side of things, it's actually significantly less of a lift. We are already pulling all of the data fields right from the load information in the TMS through our integrated work on that side. And we've integrated with Loadsure to automatically input everything on the Loadsure side. So all they have to do is click on the protect button and see their quote for their load. If there is, for any reason, something that doesn't line up against the Loadsure system, or we're getting incorrect weight or commodity value out of the TMS, it will ask the user to correct those before it submits. But otherwise, they're going to click the protect button, see the rate, and then have the option to click to purchase. And from that moment forward, your cargo is good to go and you are protected by Loadsure there. So gentlemen, what are some broker and carrier use cases for freight insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. From the broker's perspective, going back to that difference between an MTC and an all risk policy, an MTC policy, the cargo insurance that the carrier has isn't going to cover acts of God, loading and unloading, unattended vehicle, inside theft, fictitious pickups. These are all things that are outside the carrier's control, right? But because all risk coverage is true cargo coverage, those are covered by an all risk policy. You're going to come into situations, as a broker where you've got to move a load, you got to move it today, it's out on the spot market, you got a carrier, you've got their cord, you feel reasonably sure that they have the auto liability and general liability coverage that you need. And, maybe they have cargo coverage, they have an MTC on there, but you're not going to have time to go through that carrier's policy and see if they have certain exclusions around electronics or alcohol or eggs or wood or, there's all sorts of exclusions that are hidden in the fine print of these things. And unfortunately, you don't learn about it until it's too late. So, to get that load covered and get it fast and know exactly what coverage you're going to have on that cargo is crucial. And then, of course, limits motor carrier liability, typical $100,000 worth of coverage. Reefer loads, especially nowadays with all the supply chain issues and everything, and loads of chicken that used to be $35,000 are creeping well over 100,000, 120, 150 I've seen, but the motor carrier liability coverage hasn't gone up. They're still at that 100,000. So sometimes you've got to level up that coverage and be able to cover those higher and higher value loads. And, Loadsure's coverage through the Trucker Tools platform is a very, very quick and easy way to do it.
I think also from a broker perspective, obviously you have your pool of carriers for high loads that have the coverage in place, but being able to build that pool out with using Loadsure to provide the insurance coverage that is needed to meet the customer's obligations or your obligations to the customer is a great value add.
Yeah. And, again, just one of the things that I've found very useful in my past with purchasing some of these all risk policies is when you've got the right driver, somebody you've done a lot of business with, and he can help you out of a jam. And similarly, the two of you can help the shipper out of a jam because somebody else dropped the ball or was unable to pick up a specific commodity because of the risk or value associated with it. Being able to bring a solution right to the table with, hey, for X amount of dollars, usually very inexpensive. I've always found the policies to be less expensive than when we've quoted out our annual policy as a brokerage. Just a small supplement for that one trip, well worth it, and something you can usually capture back. And if you have somebody on staff that does have an insurance license, you can charge more for and make a couple bucks in the transaction. I won't dive too deep into the wormholes of how all of that works, since I am not an insurance agent and I don't want to give any advice to anybody there. So we'll move on. So how would a user go about filing a claim, and what are some examples of paid claims? I know in the insurance world, it always gets very interesting. And again, on the broker side of things, we're used to just seeing denials on almost everything.
Yeah, and you've got to ask yourself, well, what's the point of having insurance if claims are going to be denied, right? So, great question. As far as filing claims, I like to think we make it really easy. Of course, you can do it the traditional route via email, via phone number, but we do have what we refer to as electronic first notice of loss right within our platform. So you can access that right through the Trucker Tools portal, or also within the email that you receive after you purchase a policy. There's a link to file a claim embedded right within that email. And once you click that link, you fill out some basic information about the claim. You can upload documentation right through there, things like proof of delivery, packing list, commercial invoice. That's all neatly bundled up, fed into our decision management engine. And if the claim meets certain criteria, that claim can be paid pretty much immediately. If not, and then the claim is a little more complex, as a lot of cargo claims are, it's packaged up and sent over to our claims adjuster for quick adjudication. They have everything they need to get started on the claims process. And if they need to contact the claimant and get a survey or something like that, they have what they need and they kick off that process right away.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, it's quite a strange thing for an insurance company to say, but because we are fully digital and we have machine learning within our technology, the more data that goes through our systems, the more sophisticated our technology and our process becomes. So we are today, continuously learning. We will always continuously learn, and the more data that goes through our platform, the more sophisticated and the more automated that claims experience becomes.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of complicated cargo claims, yeah, we've had some interesting claims for sure. We've had one where a load of Samsung televisions, the pallets were loaded double stacked, which was not the way to load them. They had fallen over in transit. There was 4 parties involved. There was the seller, the buyer, a broker, and the shipper. So got very complicated, especially when the cartons were damaged from the televisions, but the actual televisions were not damaged. But because the cartons were damaged, the buyer felt that they couldn't sell those at retail. Who wants to buy a TV and a beat up box, right? So we were able to settle that claim, and we were able to settle that claim in, I think it was about 12 days. So that was awesome. We've had situations where someone's it's a very specific situation where someone parked a truck in a truck stop, left the keys in the truck, went in to go take a shower, came out of that truck stop, and the truck was no longer there. So yeah, that cargo was covered. You have situations where a broker is tracking that truck and expecting it to be delivered in Orlando, Florida from Texas, and it just keeps going past Orlando into Miami, and then just disappears. And lo and behold, it was a fictitious pickup. And they were tracking the truck and didn't know to call it until it was too late. These things happen, and that's why you buy insurance.
Absolutely. And I wish we could see the faces of everybody on this call, because I know for me, it's like, yep, seen something similar, had that happen. I have my thoughts on why it happened. So we've all kind of been there. Unfortunately, it's just the industry that we are in. And before we jump into kind of the Q&A section, we'll open it up and bring Tracy back in. Just another poll question. What are next steps for some individuals on this call? Certainly get a demo of the Loadsure platform. We talked about it being just a couple clicks and it's very simple to use. There's also, would you like to get a demo of the Trucker Tools platform independent of Loadsure, or would you like to see both of the products in action together so you can see how they do interplay? And while that's going on, and before I bring Tracy back in, there is a Q&A button at the very top or the bottom of your screen, depending how you have your Zoom set up. You can ask questions there, and we will present them to the panel here for some interest. I know the first question we've got lined up here is actually an interesting one, and something I struggled with as a broker in my early days. And it's really the difference between the cargo's, or excuse me, the motor carrier's insured value of cargo and what you're shipping. So we'll get into the actual question here as soon as this poll is complete.
All right, thank you, Matt. I will leave the poll question out for a few more seconds, and then I'll go ahead and close it out. All right, and it looks like the answers are starting to slow down, so I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, and we can kick it over to the Q&A session. And as Matt alluded to, here is the first question. If a load is valued at 150K and the carrier provides 100K of liability coverage, do you quote for the spike or gap of the 50K coverage? Do you quote off the first dollar of the entire 150K coverage, or is there an option to choose either or?
Yeah, great question. Very common question. Kind of going back to the difference between all risk and liability coverage. That's what really drives the answer to this question. It is first dollar coverage. So you would have to quote for the full 150,000. But on that full 150,000, that's where you're getting coverage for acts of God, loading and unloading, fictitious pickups. So it doesn't follow form as I think the initial scenario that question is asking for, where a typical gap policy or spike policy would wait for the primary liability policy to answer and then kick in based on that. This answers first, so you would file the claim with Loadsure for the full 150,000, and then we would resolve the claim with you.
Jim, and I think really good to point out different products entirely, because again, in my past, I've seen both policies presented to me, and I've suffered the consequence, we'll say, of purchasing spike coverage because you are waiting for the motor carrier to answer first. And that process likely to take 9 months. Sometimes they'll find creative ways to make it last a little bit longer before telling you no. And then you're fighting over pennies because you've already lost out on the first $100,000 of cargo. So my advice, very simply, go with a good insurance company that covers from $1 and will answer you and make it very, very easy.
Exactly.
Great, thanks, Matt and Jim. Our next question, we kind of already talked about this, but we can dive a little deeper. When should a broker be purchasing cargo insurance for the loads that they are covering?
Want to take that one?
Well, obviously, we would always encourage to purchase insurance on all loads, especially an all risk policy. To the examples that we've been talking about here, at the end of the day, our coverage here is to enable all parties to get back on their business with their business, and the protections there to protect the freight community. So the way that we operate is fully data driven. So we look at ourselves as a freight protection company. So we're here to provide coverage, and that risk transfer mechanism, but we're also here to provide insights to encourage better risk mitigation, which ultimately then brings down the cost of the premium within the ecosystem. So if you're purchasing insurance across your entire shipments or loads, then at the end of the day, we are looking at ways of driving down the cost of that insurance. So the more coverage you purchase through us, the more efficient we can be in the different commodity bandings.
Yeah, so we talked about a lot of the reasons why all risk is different, better than an MTC policy, and there's definitely some very clear reasons why you'll want to purchase this coverage over just relying on an MTC policy, especially on those high value loads or excluded commodities. But we know that at least 60% of freight globally is underinsured or not insured at all. I've seen numbers as high as 80-85%. This is a very clear opportunity for not only to cover those exceptions when you're arranging those loads or hauling those loads if you're a carrier, but there's also an opportunity to provide that extra service, that upsell, if you will, without selling insurance, but you're rolling it into the services as an intermediary. You're providing a premium service and you should be able to charge for that. So you're not, you have to be careful. You're not licensed to sell insurance. So don't sell insurance. But if you're rolling it into your services, then we believe that's acceptable. And you're offering your shippers better coverage than what they would get if they just went out to a carrier or went to another broker that just relied on the carrier's MTC policy.
Really good input from Johnny and Jim there. And one of the things that I'd really add to this, kind of broker facing quandary of like, when do you get it or what should you be doing with it? One of the things that, I found with some of the larger brokerages out there is they're educating all of their staff on their own policy limitations. What is an excluded commodity by the policy that they hold today? So when the sales team is reaching out to customers, they know immediately when they're butting up against something that they might run into trouble with their primary insurance. And now they can look at supplemental policies for that. It's also good to have a onboarding team on the carrier side that understands some of the different factors, whether it be, we'll say the reputation of certain cargo insurance companies in our industry, or even the AM Best rating, if you want to be very specific about it. Mitigating risk that way will really give you insight into what type of coverage and what's the likelihood of a carrier to pay out your claim, and where as a company do you want to make the decision to invoke a better policy on behalf of your customer. Jim, I think, said it very well with there's premium products available and you can charge premium rates for those, and you should be doing that. Give your shipper the option of, do you want to go with option A or option B?
Exactly.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. We have a couple more questions here. Next up, is there a central resource where I can look up best practices for preventing cargo theft? I think either Johnny or Jim, you want to take that?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of third-party providers out there, CargoNet, etc., that provides insights on risk mitigation. So I think just going back to my original comment about freight protection, we are obviously providing the risk transfer mechanism, and we're providing that very cost effectively by using previously untapped industry data and capturing new real-time data to provide far better, far clearer risk profile. And we're also then using that data to provide what we call holistic freight protection. And that is then the lens to be able to give our assured, our customers better insights to their risk exposure, to enable them to make better decisions in mitigating loss from occurring in the first place. And we actually believe that ultimately that active risk management and the advice that we give through our active risk management is going to be more valuable than the actual insurance paper itself. The policies will always be there to protect against that unforeseen catastrophe, but our ecosystem will minimize the chances of that occurring because of the actionable data that we're providing, the real-time alerts, the guiding reports, and obviously the just-in-time suggestions to reduce the loss. And again, just going back to the coverage and the loads that you need to cover, we are providing that insight and that recommendation to give you guidance on what coverage needs to be purchased at the best possible price.
Awesome. Thank you, Johnny. We have one more question. Are trailer tracking technologies worth the investment to prevent theft?
Yeah, great question. I'll take that one since I have a bit of a background in it and in my past lives. So yeah, trailer tracking is valuable. Is it going to be completely foolproof? No. There's driver tracking ability within the Trucker Tools platform. Definitely something that's easy to use and should be used. Is it going to prevent a nefarious carrier or a fictitious pickup or something like that from potentially disabling that tracking? It all depends on the tracking that you use. If it's something that's clear and can potentially be disabled by the driver, then maybe not. But if it's there are smaller devices out there on the market that you could potentially hide within the cargo itself, that would be much more difficult to find and or disable. That may be the better way to go for you. It depends on your situation, the type of load. Is it high risk? Where is it going? Do you trust the carrier? Those sorts of questions are what you should ask yourself when you choose what sort of tracking technology you go with.
All right, great. Thank you, Jim. And that was our last question. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Jim and Johnny and Matt, for participating in this webinar. We are, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this is recorded. There will be an email going out with the link to the recording. It is also the same link that you used to register. So if you wanted to share this recording with any of your colleagues or just rewatch it again, feel free to use that same link. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.